lot of my family relations played instruments, drums and piano and a lot of accordions, really, being Italian. My father played accordion and harmonica. Not that much, you know, but he did. They were always they were very poor and most of the time out working, you know. So I didn't really hear my dad play much, very rare, really. He'd pick up the accordion and play. But that was basically my first instrument, because being in the family, I started to learn to play it. First of all, I wanted to be a drummer, but they wouldn't let me have drums because the house wasn't big enough for a start. It was too noisy, so I got listening to different music, I got attracted to the guitar. Well, it was more rock and roll then I used to listen to, because that was on the radio, and it'd sort of be, I can't remember what the first one was, but it would sort of be Chuck Berry stuff or Buddy Holly or somebody like that. It was difficult, really, because there was a lot of gangs and stuff around where we lived. So if you weren't in a gang, it was a bit difficult, you know. And I didn't want to particularly be in a gang. So the music side of it sort of really helped me get away from that. It was a tough city. It's a equivalent to Detroit, I suppose, you know, with all the manufacturing and cars and stuff. What really appealed to me later was the instrumental stuff by the Shadows, who were probably the biggest instrumental band in England at the time. Cliff Richard was a singer, and then they used to back him, but they also did instrumentals, which for me was great because I could try and learn the instrumentals. It was something to learn. So I used to listen, wait for the radio, and they did the top 20 countdown, and wait till they come on and tape them, and then try and learn to play them. My mother bought it for me out of a catalogue. It was a Watkins. It was called a Watkins Rapier, I think it was. A very cheap one, but that was my first guitar. And in England, anyway, at that time, for me, it was difficult to get any kind of guitar, because being left-handed, you know, you'd never seen them. You'd never seen any kind of left-handed guitars of any quality. Yeah, I was in a factory, and strangely enough, I'd given my notice in to leave because I was going to turn professional with a band, go to Europe. So I'd auditioned with this band, they liked me, and I was about to get ready to go away, which would have been the first time for me, you know, and I was really excited about it. I went to work on the morning, and I used to do welding, electric welding and gas welding in the factory. And the one day this person didn't come in who used to send me the metal down, and I'd weld it. And they said, you've got to go on the machine yourself because there's nobody else to do it. Oh, God. So they put me on this big, huge, giant guillotine press. So as I'm pushing the metal through into the press, the machine came down on my hand. And the action of pulling my hand back quick, I pulled the ends of the fingers off. I mean, that was it then for me. I thought, oh, God. I just couldn't believe it, you know, the last day. And before that, I went home for lunch, and I said to my mother, I'm not going to go in this afternoon because, you know, you go back and you finish off the job properly. So, oh God, so I went back, and that's what happened. So I blamed her then. I can't remember an exact time, but it was, I did, while the bandages were on, I was trying to learn to play with my two fingers. And it seemed like forever, you know. And I went to see various specialists, and they said, you might as well pack up, you're never going to be able to play, which was really depressing. But I wouldn't accept that. I went back and I started to make my own tips. It was trial and error, so over a period, it took a while, you know. I was trying different things where I could use, and now I'd keep them on my fingers, and then I made something out of plastic and it would just slip off. So I had to come up with putting material on so it'd grip the string and wouldn't rip it. And I used leather in the end. I tried different things, and leather worked the best. I'll still have to change it, you know. If we're on tour, I'd have to change it once a month. But the firm where I worked, the manager of the firm came round to my house to see how I was, and I was really depressed, and he said, I bought you an EP around, will you play it? I went, oh no. I said, I don't want to listen to music now. I was really depressed. The last thing I wanted to do was listen to a guitar player, Django Reinhardt. He said, no, he said, put it on, and it's interesting, the story. And when I was first introduced to listening to his stuff, I couldn't believe it, because I liked bluesy stuff and jazz. And when I heard his gypsy jazz, it was really brilliant. And especially having lost the use of two fingers, it was just amazing. I could relate to that after me doing the same sort of thing, you know, damaging two fingers. And it really inspired me to get to learn to play more by, you know, the use of, by doing something with my fingers. So I made these sort of tips for them, and so I could play. It's a different thing altogether. It's like starting from scratch, and worse, because you haven't got all this, especially after being able to play chords properly before, and suddenly I'm there faced with not being able to play a full chord because of my fingers. And that's, I think, what made me sort of come up with the sort of Black Sabbath thing, the sound, because trying to make the sound bigger to fill in for the full chords that I couldn't play anymore. The first experience for me was playing in a pub in England with two guys that were probably twice my age, and one on a piano and another drummer. And they asked me if I'd come and play, and I wasn't old enough really to be in the pub. I shouldn't have been in there at that time. So that was sort of the first time I'd ever played in front of anybody. I only done the one thing with them. I said, will you do it next week? I said, no. You sort of build up to that, really, I think. Because we used to play in the early days, like just small bars and clubs, and probably you'd be playing and nobody'd be taking any notice of you anyway. They'd be drinking away and then fighting, you know. We always ended up playing places where they always broke out into a fight. So we'd be sitting there playing and somebody'd be punching the hell out of each other. So no, I don't really look on that as being on stage. That was a bit of a, like it is here, you'd be on the same level with them playing. Well, it was a band that I joined. They done sort of rock and roll stuff and whatnot. And so that wasn't too long really. I played with them for a bit, and they were good at that time, you know. If you want to walk on stage in a gold suit, gold lame suit, it was fabulous. But I didn't particularly want to wear that. I mean, they were good for that time. And for me, it was going to be a good experience because I'd never been out of England. So it was a great opportunity to sort of, you know, step forward a bit and pack my job up. So that was it. I tried to develop more of a sound, more or less, just before Sabbath, really. I was in a band with Bill Ward called Mythology. We were doing sort of blues stuff, and so that gave me an opportunity to fiddle and try and get a bit more of a raunchier sound. And it sort of come from around that period, really. The Range Master. I was telling you that story last night. I had it, and then I was playing in a club in up towards Scotland, and I lived up there for a while with this band with Bill Ward. And I was playing away, and this guy came up to me and he said, I can make that sound better for you if you like. And I went, can you? He said, yeah. And I don't know why I was so trusted. I went, oh, great. He said, I'll bring it back tomorrow. I said, okay. So I gave it him, and off he went. And I never thought for a minute he won't bring it back. But he did. He brought it back the next day, and he'd modified it to an extent. And I don't know what he'd done to it, but it was great. And I've never, to this day, like been able to get that sort of same thing. He'd put different components in it, and it worked really good. It gave me the sustain. I used that right up until probably the third, fourth, no, up until when we had Dio, so the 80s. I had a couple of guitars before that. I had a Burns Trisonic, which I didn't like, but it's the only thing we could afford then. I wanted a Strat, really, and so I had the Strat and I played that, and I worked on it myself and got it to how it feels right for me, because of, well, you know, you can't take it to a shop and say, I want it, it doesn't play right for me. Oh, what's wrong with it? And trying to explain it. So I tried to do it all myself. And I could do it and then try it and say, oh, no, I don't like that, and fiddle about with it. So really I had the Strat, and up until the first album, when we went to record that, I'd bought an SG prior to that and how I got that was I had an SG that was right-handed, and I played it upside down. I changed the strings around and played it upside down. And I heard of another guy in Birmingham who got a left-handed guitar, and he played it upside down. So I thought, God. So I tried to contact him. I don't even remember how I found out about him, but somebody obviously told me. So I arranged to meet him in a car park in Birmingham, and he brought his guitar and I brought mine, and we ended up swapping. So I then had a left-handed guitar, and I had it in the studio when we'd done the first album, but I was using the Strat because I was used to that, and I'd never actually used the SG more than a few minutes. We got into doing the first track on Black Sabbath album, Wicked World, and then my guitar started playing up, and suddenly it went off. I thought, oh no. The pickup had gone wrong. I thought, oh my God, and the producer's going, well, you have to use the other guitar, because we didn't have the time. We only had it for a day, the studio, to record the album. So I used the Gibson, and ever since that, I never looked back. I loved it and played that. That became the guitar that was on all the albums up until 1980. SG, Range Master, and Laney amplifiers I used. I had Marshalls at first, then I went to Laney amplifiers and used them because they were from Birmingham. So we had a thing going. They were from Birmingham, we were from Birmingham, and so they supplied us with all the amps. It was great. I mean, I'm not saying, when we went on tour, I had a lot of problems because I had the treble booster, and especially when we came to the States, because we were doing shows like big shows and some of the ice rings and stuff. And of course, the machines had go through the treble booster. It started picking up bloody taxis, and when we'd done the Spectrum in Philadelphia, it was horrendous, the sound. I mean, could hardly hear the sound above the buzzing. So, it did have its problems, but when it was good, it was brilliant. And it was a great combination with the SG. It sort of worked out really well. Ozzy used to be at the same school as me. He was only a year younger than me. We never really associated at school because, you'd always sort of knock about with a couple of your own friends out the same year. So he was in a different year, so we never sort of associated with him. And when I was in a band with Bill Ward up in Carlisle, with Mythology, when we broke up, we came back to Birmingham, and we decided that we wanted to stick together and form a band. And one day we went into the music shop in Birmingham, and there was an advert saying, Ozzy Zig requires gig. And I said to Bill, I know an Ozzy, but it can't be him. He can't sing. I didn't even think he could sing or anything, I'd never heard him. So anyway, sure enough, we go round to his house, followed the advert and knocked on the door. His mum came to the door, and we said, we'll come about the advert, and she said, oh, John, it's for you. So he come up, and I'm seeing him walk up the hall. I said to Bill, forget it. And he went, why? I'll tell you later. So anyway, we talked to him for a bit, and then we left and never made any decisions or anything. And then 2 days later, Ozzy came round to my house, because I lived not that far from where he lived, because we all lived in the same sort of area. So he came round with Geezer to my house, and we had a shop. My mother and father had a shop at that point. And so they came round and said, do you know any drummers? Oh, God, I said, well, yeah, and Bill was a drummer, and Bill said, I'm not doing anything. He said, unless we all go together. I said, we're sticking together. So we decided to get together and give it a go. And what a row it was. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. Because me and Bill, the band we were playing before, we really got sort of tight and really, used to everybody. And then when we got with Geezer and Ozzy, Geezer had never played the bass before. He was a guitar player, really. And it was a shamble. But it's amazing how we stuck with it, and it came together really quick, But we started getting these gigs from an agent that Bill and myself knew up towards Scotland. And I'd be on the phone saying, and she's going, you do play top 20 stuff, don't you? Oh, yeah, we're playing top 20. We didn't. It was all 12-bar blues stuff. And she went, okay, I'll give you a go. Then you can come up, do 3 days up here, and we went up and we died a death. It was So some guy came up to us, and Ozzy's standing there, and the guy went, "Your singer's crap," and Ozzy went. It was so funny, you know, but that was all part of learning really, and it made us work together and work harder. So it, you know, it became into, we were virtually living with each other all the time, and it developed into what it did. Well, we'd done a gig with Jethro Tull. We supported them, and it was the night where Mick Abraham had been fired, and they were passing notes on stage to each other, you know, and he was passing one back, and oh God, we didn't know what was going on. We thought, we keep passing notes to each other. And it's obviously probably abuse, you know. Yeah, so anyway, after they'd played, they asked me if I'd be interested in joining them. I went, what? You know, it was a bit of a shock, really. I went, oh, I don't know. I said, I've got to talk to my band and tell them, really. So I told the rest of the guys, I said, you know, they've asked me to join them, you know. They went, you should go for it. I went, oh, thanks. So I did. I mean, they supported me that way, and so I did, and I went. I got in touch with them, and Jethro Tull and management, and then turned up to play, and there was like 50 other guitar players there when I walked in the room like this, and I thought, oh no, and so I thought, bloody hell, they were auditioning all these guitar players. So I turned around and walked out, and I went, and one of the crew from 10 years after saw me walking out, and he come and grabbed me. He said, don't go, they really want to hear you. He said, go and sit in the cafe across the road. Because I said, I'm not going to sit in, I don't want to sit in here, you know. I said, I didn't think all these people were going to be here. And there were some well-known guitar players as well there. So I went and sat in a cafe across the road, and then everybody had done their bit and gone, and then they come and fetch me, and I played for them, and they said, you've got the job if you want it. So I did, and I felt really bad though for our band, you know. So when I did actually go to London for the rehearsals, I took Geezer with me. so Geezer came, and he'd be sitting at the back of the room while we were rehearsing, and I felt, oh, this is terrible. I realised after a while it wasn't for me really, because they were different. Where we were all together and had a bit of a laugh and fun, it was different for them. It was. We went for a lunch break, because everything was be there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then lunch at midday. And it came to lunchtime when we went to this cafe, and I immediately just goes and like we would all sit together, and the other three were over this table, and Ian was on this table. So I went and sat with Ian, and they're going, no. And I go, what's the matter with them? And afterwards I said, what's wrong? I said, oh no, you shouldn't sit with Ian. He doesn't like people sitting with him, you know. You got to sit with us, we're the band. Oh God, it just seemed really strange. And I just thought it wasn't for me, that sort of attitude. You got to be as a band. So I said to Ian, it's not for me, I'm going to leave. And he said, well, just give it a bit longer. I said, no, it's really not the sort of thing that I thought it would be. And he asked if I'd do the Rolling Stones movie with them. And I said, yeah, I said I'd do that, because they couldn't find anybody else that quick. So I did that. And then after that, I'd gone. But it was a good experience for me. It taught me a hell of a lot, because I see now they worked. They were, 9 o'clock, rehearsal, lunch break, back in again, rehearsal. I mean, it's like going to work, really. But they took it as far as that was what they did to discipline. So, of course, when we got back together, we found the others up and said, let's get back together. So we did. And it was me then, right, I'll pick you up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we go to rehearsal. We use the same, and it worked. You know, it was a bit difficult, because Geezer never used to get up till about 11 anyway. And I was the only one that could drive, so it was me that had to go and pick everybody up to rehearse. But it worked, and because of I'd had that experience of being with them, and learnt even that short time what it was like, and doing the movie with them was good, because I met everybody, John Lennon and Eric Clapton, and The Who, everybody who was anybody at that time were in the film, and the Stones, of course. So it just gave me a really idea of how things, you know, could be. It went from the 12-bar stuff to, we started writing our own. We wrote a couple of songs. We wrote Wicked World, and Black Sabbath was the first two. And after that, we knew, as soon as we'd done Black Sabbath, that was knew exactly where we were going. That's where we wanted to be, doing our own music. And that was the vibe we wanted. That sort of the benchmark of all the rest of the stuff, really. We were still playing blues clubs, but we played at this blues club and we'd done a few blues songs. And then we went into Black Sabbath, you know, and everybody's faces. And we thought, oh, you know, we thought we'd try it. And they came up afterwards going, what was that song you played there? You know, we really liked it. We thought, oh, that's one of our own songs, you know, all proud of it. We felt in ourselves that's where we wanted to be, what we wanted to do, and it just went from there, really. We had 2 days, and one day was for recording, the second day was for the mixing, which we weren't involved with, incidentally. We were there for the recording, and then we had to go to leave to get the boat to go to Europe, because we'd got some shows. We were playing in this place for like 3 weeks in a bar there in Switzerland, and then we'd go off to Germany and play at the Star Club and in that time, the album had come out, and we're coming back on the boat, and then we're driving from London then back home, and the top 20 came on, and they announced our album in the top 20, and we couldn't believe it. It was just like, wow. For us, it was good, but it was. We had to break a lot of barriers, you know, because it was something that wasn't about at that time. This sort of, nobody was doing the same sort of thing, because you had Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, which were different, you know. Even though Zeppelin, you know, were friends of ours, but it was a different sort of music, really. So when we came on tour, particularly here, we came here when we had Paranoid out, and that, of course, went straight up in the charts. So touring for us, I mean, nobody really knew who we were. But when we came, and people were frightened because of the name and the image that's been built up, it sort of created, obviously, a lot of problems with the church and Satanists and bloody witches and God knows what else. We opened the floodgate for everybody, you know, which was hard, because, you know, it's quite, you're vulnerable when you come out. And we had, you know, witches coming to this show, so-called witches, and then to go outside, and there's everybody with banners saying that we're Satanists and devil worshippers, and of course the church. So it was a lot of stuff we had to go through as a band. But I think all those things made us stick together more, and also caused more interest, because it'd be in the press all the time that we're trying to be banned from this place or that place. We caused an interest from the audience point of view. Oh, I wonder what they're like then. You know, we'll have a listen. So it went well after once we got through all that barrier. The first time we ever came here, we were so excited about coming, and we were so green. We didn't know what to expect or what to do. So we had our own PA system, and of course our PA went onto the plane with no casing or anything. We didn't know anything about that. It went on the plane with a plastic cover on. The amps went on with plastic covers on. When we got to New York, there we are watching them come down the thing. Oh, right. Of course, we got to the first place we were playing at, which was a place called Ungano's Club in New York. And it was a really tiny place, and a bit of a dump, really. And that was our first experience of playing in New York. We went, "Do you see it?" And it was. And the roadie we had at that time, who worked with us, we didn't pay him, but he worked with us. We never even thought about the power difference, you know, from England to America. So he plugged the amps in, and they blew up. I thought, oh no. It was absolute chaos, it really was. But we had somebody come out and do them, and we played 2 nights at this Ngano's club. And then the next night was, the third time we played in New York was the Fillmore. And God, that's when it started with, bloody hell, it's great. And our PA looked really naff that we brought over in comparison to the stuff they got there. And we'd never used a monitor system up until then, because we never, you know, we couldn't afford it. We never had one. Well, we never heard of them, a monitor system. And then when we got to the Fillmore and they got monitors and everything, it was brilliant. And we were doing we were playing with Rod Stewart. Funny combination now, but and it went down really great. And that sort of was the start of it, really. That's back to your question, what was it like, to see the audience. That's when we first realised, blimey, this is what we want to do. This is fantastic. I got back from, because we were in America, I got back from America, and I'd done an interview with, at my home with Melody Maker. They said, oh, you know, you're playing heavy metal. I went, heavy metal, what's that? And he went, oh, well, that's what you're playing. I went, no, we're heavy rock. He went, no, you're heavy metal. I said, well, we call it heavy rock, you call it heavy metal, we'll call it what you like, but we're heavy rock. And I wouldn't accept the heavy metal thing for years. And, you know, of course, eventually you had to, because it probably was, you know, that's what people described the music as. Well, it was a bit of each, I think, because the first, obviously because of the music, because of Black Sabbath and the sort of songs we were doing, the first album cover was a woman on the front with a black cloak on, and inside the cover was an inverted cross. So that sort of, as you can imagine, opened a complete can of worms in 1969. So that was basically a bit of the record, you know, a lot of the record company, because of the imagery they put out, because nobody really had seen us. And they'd seen the album cover, oh, blimey. And then, of course, they'd see us, and because of what we played, it was scary music to them, which was really what we were trying to create, because in those days, Geezer and myself used to go and watch a lot of horror movies, and we loved them. Midnight horror movie, you know. And I thought it'd be great to do music like, you know, to have a music like this horror, to create the same vibe as a horror film would do then. And that was sort of what we did. I had a couple of ideas, like War Pigs. I did that when we were doing live shows, when we were in Germany, really, or Switzerland, playing. We'd try because we had to do 7 45-minute spots a day. We hadn't got enough songs. I mean, you know, we couldn't do one spot. We had enough songs to do one spot. But we were doing 7 45 minutes, so we had to try and devise something. So we'd have one. We tried one bit with a drum solo for nearly one of the things, which didn't go down well at all. They told us to stop. And then we just tried jamming, and it was where a lot of like NIB came up, and War Pigs, because I'd start playing these things, making them up in a solo, and it became regular. I'd remember the riff and start playing it. And so after the tour, when we went into the studio to do Paranoid, those were the ones that we targeted straight away, you know, War Pigs and Fairies Wear Boots and stuff like that. So we sort of had some of the riffs, and other ones were put together when we're in the studio or into rehearsal. The first 3 albums were done by the same producer, Roger Bain. So it wasn't that bad then. It was after that. We hadn't used a producer for a while. We'd used Roger Bain up until Masters of Reality, and then we did Sabbath Bloody Sabbath ourselves, and a couple of the others. But you'd always, when we did start using a producer again, was later, that was when I was with Dio. And then you start saying, well, the sound's a bit too distorted and the bass is distorted. I said, yes, I know, but that's the sound. it's the combination of the two. I said, don't separate them, because, you know, they have a habit of separating and listening to, oh, that's all distorted. Yeah. So it was a bit of a challenge, really. And we didn't sort of have it so much. Obviously, Roger Bain knew what sort of sound we had, and they just captured the sound we had. But when it came to Sabbath, British Sabbath, you had to then, because we did it ourselves, you had to then impregnate the bloody the engineer, saying, well, this is our sound. Before we go any further, this is what it is. Don't separate stuff. This is what you've got to listen to it as a whole. Because if you listen to it individually, it's just not right. It's all ragged and everything, but that was part of the sound. And eventually, once they got that, we used the same engineer then for a few albums, so we knew what we were looking for, which was better really for us. I mean, we liked it that way as opposed to putting I'd never worked with a click track until later, lot later in the 80s. Masters of Reality album was tuned down. And it was, again, I used to experiment a lot with different things, different tunings, different ways of trying to get the sound bigger. And so I tuned down, and it just sounded really heavy, when we'd done Into the Void and stuff like that, and Children of the Grave. It just give it a lot more clout, really, just sounded a bigger version. So we tuned down, and it sort of worked. And then, of course, you had the thing of people trying to learn them, going, what key is it in? We can't figure out what key that's in. And of course, we'd still call it E. Oh, it's in E. Oh, it doesn't sound in E. No, it's not. In the music, in Sabbath music, we tried to create a lot of light and shade where you drop down and then build it up and drop down. And I just thought doing something acoustically would give it a break instead of it all being all the way through, to put an acoustic thing in. And I used to like experimenting. As I say, I experimented using the London choir on one of the tracks, and the rest of the band never knew. So they come I'd have this choir in the studio, and I remember Ozzy coming down the studio, and he didn't know if they were going to be in. And he walked in, I'm in the control room, I seen him walk in, and he'd gone and walked out. And he come back about 10 minutes later, in again. Because he thought he'd come in the wrong studio. And I said, no, I said, we're just putting a thing down to see if everybody likes it. And we had the harp player from the Philharmonic Orchestra. And it came out really well. And we'd done a track called Superstar. And I like to do that. I like to do something a bit different. And then it makes the other stuff, when it comes in loud or something big, it makes it a bit sort of stand up a bit, instead of it all being on one level. I think Sabbath stuff's been about that. I've always wanted to have, you've got the riff, and then you might go down to a nice part or quiet part, and then either change key or change into a different sort of riff to keep it a bit more sort of happening, as opposed to just plodding on with the same riff. Well, Van Halen toured with us for 8 or 9 months. Great, they really liked it. And I used to have Eddie, Eddie is one of my best friends now. I still stay in touch. But he used to come in my room and they'd pick your brains, They'd sort of ask, oh, what's this like, what's that like? And for them, it was learning more information, because we were like old on the block then by that point, to them anyway. It was good. It was enjoyable, but then it got a bit too much, because they started their show, they were going on first, and they were gradually learning things from us and doing the same sort of arrangement, in their show. They'd have a drum solo and this and that and the other, and as the months went on, the drum riser got bigger, like Bill's did, and more stuff. And I got really annoyed one night. I said, hey, Eddie, you're going to play a couple of songs off our new album tomorrow? He went, hey, man, we love you guys. And it got off like that, but it was just a bit of sarcasm. No, it was great. It was great having him. They're a great band as well, great guitar. And he was, to me, like listening to his playing, really different. They'd come up with something different, the way he plays, and it was a great style and a great band. Kiss, on the other hand, well, I don't know what happened there, because we didn't sort of get on with them. And I remember seeing the sign outside Black Sabbath and Kiss, and so it was on this, got those letters that you stick on, And we found a P and took the K off and put piss on it. So it was like, it was one of those. And we used to see them at the airport and we never knew who they were because they'd always have their makeup on. We couldn't tell if that was the crew or the band because they'd all got everybody got spots. And you're sort of looking at them and going, is that the band or the crew? So for a while it was a bit funny, but you know, as time went on, it got okay. The Painting Gold one was when we were in Los Angeles and we were recording Volume 4, I think it was, Volume 4. And we rented a house in Bel Air of John DuPont, who was the famous DuPont products, you know, the paints and lighters and all that rubbish. And so we rented his house and it was lovely, got a ballroom and everything. And the idea was we were going to write the album there. So we had all the gear set up in by the pool, in this room by the swimming pool. And we go rummaging around the garage and there's all these paints in there, there's spray paints and lacquers and God knows what else. Oh, great. And so one night, Bill Ward, he got absolutely pissed as a parrot. I mean, he was drunk. So he got back to the house and he couldn't get his clothes. So he got his clothes off and he's like, and for some silly reason, we had an idea of spraying him gold. We got these spray can paints and sprayed him gold and everywhere. And then got this lacquer and lacquered him, clear lacquer. And it was laughing at first. Then he got really violently sick. I mean, oh God, what's happening, you know? And he would like this. I thought, bloody hell. So I had to phone 911 and I said, what is it? I said, it's emergency, can we have an ambulance? And I said to him, well, what's wrong with him? Well, he's painted gold. I mean, they went, what? We painted him gold and he's throwing up. And of course they came out and they just ripped us apart, you idiots, you know. You could have killed him. And they gave him a big injection of to perk him up. They said, you've got to you've got to remove this straight away. So we went in the garage again and got this paint stripper, come back and starts rubbing this paint stripper on him. And of course he went all red then. It was like a beetroot. It was just mad, really. Really stupid. I mean, you never thought of the consequences, really. He could have died, you know. And the same with setting him on fire. It became a bit of a joke at first. We'd done this party piece where me and Bill had a thing, and you know the studio alcohol stuff that you can put on and burn it, and it just burns off and nothing. Right. We got this producer, Martin Birch, and he came in the studio, and he was a bit frightened of us, you know, because he'd heard the reputation of Sabbath and everything. Bill walked in. I said, Bill, can I set fire to you? He went, not just now, I'm busy. I went, okay then. And he went out into the control room and into the drum room and fiddling about with his drums. And he come back and he went, okay, I'm ready now. Do you want to set me on fire? I went, okay. And Martin Birch is going, what the hell's going on? So I got these 2 bottles of rubbing alcohol and poured them on Bill. And of course it soaked into his clothes and I lit him and he went up like a bomb, woof, like this. And could I put too much on instead of it just burning off? It didn't, it burnt through his trousers and burnt all his legs. And so he had to go to hospital. He had 3rd-degree burns. It was rolling on the floor and I thought it was part of the joke and I'm still pouring stuff on him. Oh, it's absolute mad. You know, it's lucky we got away with it, really. And of course, then I felt so bad for Bill because he got these burns down his leg and his mother phoned me up. Oh God, did she have a go at me? You balmy bastard. Bill might have to have his leg off. I mean, what? I don't know what he told her. He must have told her he might have to have his leg off. So that was that party piece out the window as well. We didn't do that again. After Volume 4, we went back to that house again to do, we rented the same house again, John DuPont, and went back to the house to record, which turned out to be Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. But we got there and the studio we were using, the record plant, Stevie Wonder had built a bloody giant Moog in there, so we couldn't use that. We couldn't go to that one. So it all went a bit pear-shaped, really. And to top it all, I couldn't think of anything, because it was always me that come up with the initial stuff, and then they'd go, oh, I like that, and then we'd make it into a song. I just, for some reason, I couldn't think of anything. And I got really more nervous and worried about it, and worse it got. And so we decided, that's it, we got to leave it, and let's go back to England, have a break, and then try it again. So we went back, and we had a break for a couple of weeks. And then we rented a castle in Wales called Clearwell Castle, and we set the gear up in the dungeons there as a bit of vibe, so I get a bit of vibe there. And the first thing I came up with was Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and again, that was the benchmark for that album. So we'd done that, and it was working again, but it was frightening at first when I had that. And Geezer come up with the titles. He came up with all these strange titles and things, because he was the clever one in the band, really. Read all the books and everything. So it was mainly him, really. He put names down, and we, oh, that's good. I don't know. Technical Ecstasy was the first album we brought in. We had a keyboard player then, Jez Woodruff, who went on to work with Robert Plant later. I wanted somebody I could work with, to swap ideas and to support me. If I want to play something, you got somebody there. And Jez was, a good one to have. I play the chords while I try things out. And so Technical Ecstasy was born with him involved in it, really. And yet it was a bit different to the other stuff, but there were some good songs on that album, I think. And from that things started falling apart a bit after that, for Never Say Die. Great title to have, isn't it? And then you break up. Ozzy went, and then he came back, and it was all a bit chaotic. And we had another singer come in, write a couple of songs with him, a guy from Savile Brown, I think he was, and Fleetwood Mac. We wrote a couple of songs with him, and it just weren't right. He was singing, it just didn't sound right for us. And Ozzy came back, which was great. But he came back 2 days before we were due to go to bloody record the album, which we didn't have, because he couldn't use any of them songs that we've done with somebody else. It had to be Ozzy involved. So Bill ended up singing one of them, Swinging the Chain. And it was really hard. We went to Toronto. I booked the studio. We went to Toronto because it was a tax thing as well, getting out of the country. And because I was one who always had to book the studio, they looked to me to do that, where we're going to go and all the rest of the stuff. So off we go to the studio in Toronto with no music, and we rented a cinema. It was freezing cold, absolutely froze stiff. We had to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning to start writing a track to record on the night. So it was really difficult, really hard. So that album was put together sort of like that, really. It was quite a difficult time. And after the problems we'd had with Ozzy leaving and coming back, and it sort of set a funny vibe, I think. And then, of course, after that, we'd done that tour, the Never Say Die tour, and then that was it. That was the one Van Halen went on. That's something with me. I have to see things through. I can't just leave it. And I'm a great believer of that, of following through and believing in what you do. And it was a big challenge for us as well to bring somebody else in to replace Ozzy. And it was at the time where, to be honest, I got unhappy, and I was thinking of moving myself and doing another project. And that's how I met Ronnie. I met him at a party. Sharon, Ozzy's wife, introduced me to him. We talked about doing something together, doing an album together. Not a Sabbath, just an album. And then as it happens, with Ozzy going, first one I contacted was Ronnie, do you want to come for an audition with the band? I spoke to the band. I said, yeah, let's try him. So we got him over, and it worked. His work ethics were great. He was very professional. It was great for me to sit down and write with, because we had a good thing going. It was good. It was all working and we could actually write new stuff in a slightly different direction to what we've been doing. Because whereas with Oz, a lot of the stuff was riff-based, which we liked, and Oz'd sing maybe like Iommi, he'd sing the riff. But when we had Ronnie wasn't used to singing over riffs like that. He'd sing across them and used to singing on maybe chords as opposed to riffs. But it was an amalgamation of the two of let's try this and let's try that. And his voice was, I mean, there's no two ways about it, fantastic. You can't believe he come out of that little body, you know, such a big voice. And it was so good. But then we had to prove to everybody else. We had to start again, which in some ways was good because it made us work again, made us get out and try and prove it again. And eventually we did. We had Heaven and Hell, and that came out, and that started doing well. And the shows were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and up and running again. And that went for a while, and then we broke up over a bloody live album. We had a few comments about, you know, we disagreed on things. Geezer and myself were told that Ronnie was going in the studio altering things when we'd left, which, you know, was probably totally rubbish, but that's what we were told. Anyway, it came to a bit of a collision and he went. So then I phoned David Coverdale up, and he said, oh God, I've just got this band together, Whitesnake. I went, oh. He said, why didn't you phone me before? I said, because he hadn't left before. It's happened now. So that was a thing. So then it was like looking for another singer, and we auditioned various singers, including Michael Bolton, believe it or not, was one of them, which was an odd one. It just went on a bit, and it sort of, we couldn't decide. And eventually it came to Ian Gillan, and we had him. We got together with Ian Gillan. We had a meeting, and Ian doesn't seem to remember the meeting because he got too drunk. He couldn't remember what happened. So that was another story with them lot. That was great. We had a great time. Again, it was good. It's a challenge again. So you know, it's somebody else singing and somebody different, and it sort of gets you into a different vibe. And we wanted to make it sort of really a heavy sort of album. But we worked at different hours because Ian would tend to stay up all night, and we wouldn't. So he'd be up drinking his scotch in the kitchen, and we'd go to bed and get up in the morning. He's still there. But he'd been to bed and had his shave and everything, got up, and he's doing the crossword. How can you do that? Drink a bottle of scotch and go to bed, and and we go to bed first and get up, and he's up. He's been to bed and got up again. But he'd go in the studio and work. He used to work in the morning, and then we'd go and have a listen to what he'd done. And no, it was different. I think we're doing the Seventh Star then, the album, me and Glenn Hughes. And this idea came of doing Live Aid and getting back together. And so we all met up in Philadelphia, which supposed to have been a rehearsal, which we didn't rehearse much. We ended up talking most of the time, you know, because we hadn't seen each other for a while. And done that show, and then we'd gone. There was all rumours about we're going to get back together again, which we never did. And that was it really, until we did get back together properly. It was, but unfortunately, it was sort of dehumanised. It was sort of the wrong time within the business at that time. The music had sort of moved on a bit with other bands, and you know, you got the other sort of bands out, Nirvana and God knows what else. But yeah, we did that. We toured with it. Dehumaniser. I think we broke up because Ozzy was doing his farewell gig, the farewell gig, and they asked us to play on it, and we said to Ronnie, and Ronnie went, I'm not doing it. And we said, well, we're going to do it because you know, it's Ozzy, he's our mate, and we'd like to do it. He said, well, I'm not going to sing, and we felt bad about it, but we'd sort of agreed to do it. So then we had to try and find a singer who's going to sing it. We thought of Tony Martin, who I'd done, you know, done quite a few albums with him. And then Rob Alford said he'd like to do it. So we done it with Rob. We rehearsed with him, and and done those shows with him. Yeah, it was great. I wanted to do something a bit different and a solo album, and I had Bob Marlett involved to produce it, who I'd never worked with before, but incidentally I met him through Rob Halford, because he'd used him on his album. And Rob's going, oh, he's great. So we ended up sort of using him. And it was good to work with, and then it was trying to find singers who's going to sing on it. And we had a whole list of singers, and one big cock-up I did make, Eminem was going to sing on it, and I didn't know who Eminem was. And they said, this Eminem wants to sing on it. I went, who's Eminem? I had no idea who he was. It was quite embarrassing, really. And so we didn't have Eminem. We had Kid Rock came, and he'd done a couple of things, and we never used that. And then we had a list of other people who came and did it. But it was good. It was good fun. It was good to do. I wanted to do something a bit different for me than what I've done. Billy Corgan was a good to work. It was nice to work with other people, you know, who I never knew half of them. You know, it was nice to work with them and see how they worked as well. But on that album, yeah, Dave Grohl and Ozzy, Billy Corgan, Billy Idol. Skin, who was in a band called Skunk and Nancy, who was really good. Peter Steele. Oh yeah, Phil Anselmo. And from the Cult, Ian Asprey. Well, I'd done a lot of the structure, and they'd have a listen to it, and you know, and come up with ideas to sing on it. So I'd more or less we'd done the sort of the groundwork on it and recorded it, and then they come along. But Billy Corgan, we worked that out from scratch in the studio, and we played it live there and then, you know, and recorded it. But the others, of course, you had to give them an idea what it was like, and send them or they'd come and listen to the track a couple of times and get used to it, and then go away and come back. But no, it was good. It was good doing stuff like that. And we had Henry Rollins was the first one, and it was ever so funny, because we were doing it in Bob's house, in his studio, the engineer, the producer's studio. And I sat there on the couch like that, and Henry Rollins comes in, and he wants to do it in the room with us. So he's singing away, and he starts dancing about, and I'm sort of like this, going, oh no. And I try not to laugh, you know, he just looked really, really funny. He's a lovely guy, really nice guy, and he really excited about doing stuff, you know. And that was great to see that enthusiasm and all. And the same as Dave Grohl, he was so enthusiastic, it drives you on. And he said, can I play drums as well? I went, well, we've already got a drummer on it. Yeah, but take him off and I'll play drums. And the drummer we took off was the drummer from Soundgarden, Matt Cameron. Oh, blimey. But Dave wanted to play drums, and he sang on it. So yeah, but it was good. It was a good vibe, really. I enjoyed doing that. Believing in what we did, I think, you know, which we always have done, and we always stuck together, and that was our thing, to be together. And I mean, and we did. We lived together. We were always together, you know, in the early days, always. And that bonds it, makes it bond, and it's you against the rest of the world, you know, all the people that don't like it. It's you're there as a team. That's sort of what made it work, the belief in what we're doing, and the thing to drive us on, and we relied on each other for that. No, it was really good. To have an end of 50-year career seemed a bit odd, really. But it didn't seem like the end, if you know what I mean. It seemed like, oh, well, we'll probably get back together next year and do it again. Because you don't know, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. And everybody says, are you going to get back together again? And you can go, no, but you never know. We might do an odd show, or unlikely we will do any tours or anything, but you can never say never. We've said that so many times over the years. Oh, we're never going to get back together with Dio or whatever, and we did. And same with us. Not because of us, we just didn't think it was going to happen. But the last show of that was, yeah, it was quite emotional, really. I've actually got this one in the bedroom. I'll go in and put the news on, and I'll sit there and play for a bit before I brush my teeth and all that stuff. So I tend to sort of do play, And sometimes in the day I'll play for a bit, but life's taken a different course for me now since we've stopped, because other things have come involved. And I've been doing the Forbidden album, you know, mixing that with Mike Exeter, the engineer, which was an old album we did, and we wanted to remix it. The plan will be, though, so I want to go in and record some more. I've got loads and loads of riffs that I want to put down. And once Mike Exeter, once we get over this year, and we've got time, because he's obviously booked, he's been doing the Priest album and this and that and the other, then we're going to start putting some stuff down. Maybe more as for film music or something like that. I don't know, we might do an album, I don't know yet. There's probably loads of things I haven't done, but I'm happy with what I have done.